Well, hello and welcome today to this video. Today we are going to talk about tools. I know probably most of you have seen my tools checklist, and though I do cover the basics in that, I'm going to review the tools on that checklist and then introduce a few other tools that I also use a lot. So going back to that checklist, we've got grabbers. We've got 3 different kinds of grabbers here. These ones are called a bullnose grabber. They're a little bit wider. These are all bullnose grabbers, and they're all different widths of bullnose grabbers. So I grab different ones of these at different times depending on the job. These are bent nose pliers for, I hope, obvious reasons. The nose is kind of bent. I often grab these when using these other ones makes a really awkward angle for my wrist to work on. If these ones make a really awkward angle for your wrist, then chances are these bent nose pliers are going to work better for you for that particular job. I use these all the time for tucking bales inside, wire ends inside of bales, different things like that. So these are great tools to have. These ones here, they're called chain nose or needle nose pliers. I've got some different ones here. I've got 2 pairs of these, which are great. They work really good. They come together really nicely, so I can grip right on the edge and still have a really good firm grip. These ones are a cheaper pair, and you can see I grabbed a wire that was too big and tried to manipulate it, and it actually bent the tips of my pliers apart, which makes the end of them basically useless for grabbing. Things just slip out the end. So, I mean, I keep these kind of in my arsenal to show you what a cheaper set of pliers can do. This is another cheaper set. I've had these for many, many years since I was a kid and first started working with like head pins and things. They are not ideal because they actually have teeth. Can you see that? Let's see if I can make that focus. They actually have teeth on the insides of the jaws that are going to mark your wires. If I grab onto a piece of copper with these teeth, they're actually going to leave teeth marks in my wire. Now, if you want teeth marks on a certain section of your wire for your design, awesome, go crazy. But most of the time, you just need a firm grip on your wire and you don't want to be leaving these teeth marks behind. So do not use a set of pliers like these with these grabby teeth on them. So these are all grabbers, as I said. So what do grabbers do? Well, obviously they grab. Do I have a chunk of wire here? Here's a chunk of silver wire just kind of kicking around. Anytime I need to make a sharp bend in my wire, you need this inside corner of your jaw to be nice and sharp so that you can grab on, put your thumb really close, and make a really sharp corner in your wire. And you can even grab this side, oops, and squeeze. And grab this side and squeeze. And by doing that, you can make a really sharp bend in your wire. So anytime I need to just grip my wire or make a sharp bend, any of these grabbers are going to be what I'm grabbing for, reaching for, I guess is the word I want. Sometimes you want the fatness of these. Maybe you have to get onto an object and straighten a piece of wire, so straighten a kink out of a wire, so you need to get that fatness right on the end, so that's when you need bullnose pliers. Sometimes when you're reaching in somewhere, you don't have very much space and you need the narrowness of your needle nose pliers to get into a certain space. The situation is going to determine which set of grabbers you need. I do recommend you start with at least 1 set of grabbers, but as you work, you're going to find different situations that require all of these. If I take these 2 out, and maybe that pair, this is what I carry home with me every single night when I go from work to home, because I also work at home. So I carry a lot of pliers with me. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need all of these pliers, but I do recommend that you have at least 1 set of needle nose, 1 set of bent nose, and 1 set of bull nose. So those are my grabbers. Those are very important tools. These are a pair of parallel jaw pliers. You see the way they open and close? That's why they're parallel jaws compared to another set of pliers that opens like this. When I need to grab several wires, where are they here? I had an example. If I need to grab two wires that are the same gauge, so these two wires are the same thickness, if I want to grab both of them with something like this, I'm actually only going to grip the first wire. This one's kind of in there, but it's totally loose and it's not gripping it. And I don't have a firm hold on both wires. Whereas if I bring my parallel jaw pliers in here, because of the way they come together in a parallel action, I can grip two wires that are the same thickness, and I've actually got a hold on both wires. Okay, so I could have 4 or 5 wires across here, and it would actually grip all of those wires because of this parallel jaw action. So these are always a little more expensive. They are not the first tool that I would recommend buying, but if you get into this, sometimes there are great uses for parallel jaw pliers, so I just wanted to introduce you to those. What do we have next? I've got a pair of nylon jaw pliers. They are great for straightening wire. So let's say I've got like, oh man, I need to still use this wire on my piece and I want these kinks out of it, so I start with a nice smooth piece of wire. You have to hold one end in a pair of grabbers so you have a really firm grip on this. And now you simply run your nylon jaw pliers down the wire. It might take a couple of times depending on how strong you are in your grip and how sharp these bends are. But you can basically bring that wire back to smooth so that you can use it in your designs to shape with. Okay, so these are nylon jaw pliers. I use them all the time. I love these pliers. You can see they're well used. These are a great tool. I really love these. Let's talk about cutters for a minute. I've got a few sets of cutters here. Of course, I don't just have one of anything because I'm kind of a tool nut. But I do want to talk about the difference between a regular set of cheap cutters, which there you can see they come in on one side and have this indent here, and there's a smaller indent on this side, but there's also an indent over here. So if you can imagine, if I cut a piece of wire with these, let's just do that. The piece of wire that comes off of this side is going to have this pointy bit, and the piece of wire that comes off of this side is going to have a smaller pointy bit. Let's see if I can actually cut this thick wire with these cheap cutters. Find my other bit that I cut off, but there's actually a little bit of a pointy bit on the end of that wire and the end of this wire. So pointy ends are not our friend in jewelry making. You can actually see the flat side there that it's created, and then it comes to a point. Pointy ends are scratchy. We don't like them in jewelry. They're no good at all. If I go to a set of flush cutters, this is a really good set of heavy-duty flush cutters. It's got an indent over here, but this side is completely flat. There's no like micro bevel or small indent over here. It's completely flat. So if you can imagine, if I cut a wire with these, the piece over here that comes off of this side is going to have a point on the end. This is my garbage side, okay? When you cut a piece of wire, especially an end off like this, it's always good practice to get in the habit of putting your finger over this garbage side, because otherwise, just like with those other cutters, that end is going to ping off. It's going to end up in your socks and in your laundry, and I guarantee you that the people you're living with are not going to be very tolerant of these wire ends. So that one's got a big point on it. However, because I did it this way and my flush cutters are on this side, the piece of wire that comes off of that side is perfectly flat. It's actually got a flush cut on it. I can spin that around and it's actually a square cut, which is what we want. Square cuts are way less scratchy. They're way nicer to fold in and control. So we always want to make sure we have a nice flush cut on the end of our finished piece. And remember, this indent in our flush cutters, this is our garbage side. We always want to keep, especially when we start working with sterling silver, we always want to keep these little wire ends because that's solid silver. These add up. It's worth keeping these, sending them back to the foundry, and getting a little bit of money back for them, right? That never hurts. So flush cutters, super important. There are times when you just need to cut a length of wire for a project, in which case your ends will be trimmed off later and it doesn't matter. You just need to cut the wire. But there are other times when you're cutting a tail off and this piece is part of your finished project and you really want that to be a nice flush cut. So pay attention to which way you're holding your cutters. So flush cutters have a super, super flush edge right here. These are like super ultra flush cutters. They come to an extra really nice edge here, and I still have a garbage side over here. But these have a limit to the thickness of wire I can cut with them. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 16 gauge. I don't ever want to exceed the maximum cutting limit to my pliers, because that's going to be really hard on this joint here, and it's your cutters are gonna not line up as nicely and as smoothly when this joint starts to wear out, especially on the tips, and the tips you use the most. So if you're just cutting a piece of wire off of the spool, I always recommend using the middle part of your cutters and saving those tips for the times when you need them. And there will be times when you need them, because the tips are how you get in there into the corner and get the really close cuts. And a good set of cutters is going to make all the difference in the world to getting those ends close, where you can tuck them in and not feel them and not have them be all scratchy. These ones are called end cutters. They are super old and rusty. I've had these since I was a kid. I have nothing against end cutters per se, but they almost always have this second micro bevel here, and they're not true flush cutters. Even though it's just an ever so slight little indent right there, it still is, and it's not going to leave a nice perfectly flat flush cut when I'm done with these. Whether you prefer end cutters or side cutters is totally a preference to you. It's not that I have anything against end cutters, I've just never owned a really good pair of them, so don't like these ones have all been chewed by the dog and stuff. I've had them for a lot of years, but they're kind of another example of what a not great cutter looks like. So that's cutters. All right, couple more tools here I want to cover. We've got some round nose pliers here. All right, these are a really nice pair of heavy duty round nose pliers. They get quite fat. We've got some ones that are a little bit narrower on the tip. Anytime you need to make a loop or a curve, a small curve, you want to wrap your wire around something round, okay? I'm going to go into more detail on this later and show you exactly the steps, but anytime you want to make a loop, the only way to make it perfectly round is to actually wrap it around something round. So these are actually mandrels. Mandrel is a fancy word for the object I'm wrapping my wire around. These are nice tapered mandrels. I can get small circles up here, medium circles here, and large circles down here. So depending on where I grip my wire along these jaws is going to determine how big of a loop or a circle that you get. Okay, we'll talk more about loops in the next video. Right now, I just want to cover what we use each tool for. So those are round nose pliers. I do have one more pair here that's got one round nose jaw and one nylon jaw plow. One nylon jaw. I guess I can use that word twice in this instance, although it's not very good English. The reason that you might want something like this is that sometimes when you grab the outside of your loop, you end up with a tiny little tool mark right where you grab on the outside of your loop. These will make sure you don't get that tool mark. You can wrap these around and it's not going to leave a tool mark on the outside of your wire. So that's the whole point with the one nylon jaw and the one round nose jaw. I don't use these very often, but there might be the odd occasion where I'm really concerned about that dent on the outside of my loop. Most of the time I just use regular nylon round nose pliers though. But I just wanted to show you those. The last set of pliers I've got, which maybe you haven't seen these yet, and that's okay, that's why we're here. These are bail making pliers. I've got two sets of regular bail making pliers. I've got an 8mm, a 6mm, a 5mm, and a 3mm. These are mandrels. The reason that you would use something like this rather than your regular round nose that has these tapered jaws is if I have more than one wire. So they're called bail making pliers because the bail is the part of the pendant that actually goes around the necklace. It's the top of the pendant that actually goes around the necklace, and that's what the pendant hangs from. And you often want more than one wire in your bail. So if I want to wrap more than one wire, I want there to be a cylindrical shape left. If I wrap two wires around something tapered, well, the one on this side is going to be a smaller loop than the one on this side because I'm using a tapered object. Because this one is a cylindrical, if I wrap them both around, they're both going to have exactly the same profile. Okay, so that's why you would use a bail making plier anytime you need to wrap more than one wire and you want it to have the same profile. You need to use a cylinder. I also have a pair of fancy schmancy parallel jaw pliers, bail making pliers. They work the same way, except they're going to grip across those wires a lot nicer than these guys here. I tend to not use this one because I need different inserts that are the right size for me. I find these a bit too small for the pendants that I make. But the cool thing is you can actually unscrew these and replace these and put a bigger size in. So one day I'll get a bigger size for these, and then I think I'll really enjoy these pliers. But in the meantime, you'll see me using these ones a lot. I'm sorry, that's not focused better. All right, so another tool, you can use this instead of bail making pliers. This is a stepped mandrel, and these happen to be 1mm, 2mm, 3mm, 4mm, and 5mm. So if you need to know exactly how big of a loop you're making, say you've got a necklace and the clasps fit through a 4mm bail, well, you need to make sure that your bail is at least 4mm so that your necklace will fit through the bail. I hope that all makes sense. This is nice because it has more sizes, but it's not as handy to use as a set of pliers. The set of pliers are going to do some grabbing for you. This is just one extra thing you have to hold, as well as your pendant and your wires, and you have to manipulate that while holding an extra thing, whereas this does some of the holding for you. So I very rarely use one of these, and I more often use the pliers just because I find that they work a lot better. So that's basically our pliers. We're almost done tools, I promise. You don't need all of these pliers, but you do need a good selection. Another tool you'll find that I use is a ruler. Sometimes I use a measuring tape, sometimes I use a ruler. But every once in a while, it's just good to know how much wire to grab. Another tool that I sometimes use is a marker. I like these Sharpie markers. Every once in a while, you just have to make a mark on your wire, and this is a great tool for that. I also use painter's tape a lot. This is, I know there's actually a tool called the third hand, but this is my third hand. This is what I use anytime I don't have enough hands. I love it because you can stick it to your stone and your wire and your work, and when you take it off, when you're done with the tape, it will not leave any sticky residue behind. So it holds when you need it to, and it comes off cleanly when you're done with it. So I really like painter's tape for that. I've just got one last tool to show you. This is a great little clamp. It comes with a wedge piece. You would use this when we get into the wire weaving. If we're not there yet, but say I had some wires that I'm weaving together, and as I'm working, this hand that's holding the base wires is getting really fatigued. Well, I can come in with this. It's got nice suede patches here so that it's not going to damage any of your fine wire work. So you would lock it on like this. You're going to stick this wedge into the other end and shove it quite hard. And I was a bit skeptical when I saw a video of this tool at first, but it actually holds really well, and it gives you a much more comfortable thing to hold onto. It's much more comfortable to grip onto a big fat object like this than to pinch these wires. So when you're weaving and you're working sometimes for hours at a time doing your weaving, this is going to give you a much, much more comfortable grip, okay? They do make other ones of these that have like a wing nut that's drilled through here and does the holding instead of this wedge. But I find that the wing nut is kind of in the way when you need to actually hold this tool. So I like the wedge. I actually was surprised at how well it worked. But again, not an essential tool, but if you really want to get into the weaving and your hands, especially your holding hand for these base wires, gets a little fatigued, this might be something you want to look for. So just a wooden ring clamp. So that is the last tool that I want to talk to you about today. I hope that that helps. I hope that gives you an idea of what you need to look for when you're out buying tools. As we get into some of these other modules and you see me using these tools, you might find you need to pick them up later. So, crash course on tools. Check. Done. Yay! We are ready to start bending wire in the next video. We're getting there, I promise. This first whole module is all about foundational building. We want to get you started on the right foot so you are not frustrated as you go into these other modules. So even if some of this is review, please just watch through it once, and I hope you'll learn lots from it. Have a great day. Thank you.